He's like, we're on now. We're mic'd, yeah, we're good.
We all good? All right, thank you. Well, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us. I hope perhaps you had the opportunity to get some lunch downstairs. If you didn't, make sure you do it another day. Come in, have lunch, especially with your child. They love that.
Oh, yeah.
But honestly, you are always welcome to join us for lunch and visit. But we're really glad to see you here today. We're going to talk for a little bit about a project we've been working on. Even though you'll see that we've pulled together a committee in December of 2018, the concept of late start and changing our daily schedule, we've been working on this in concept probably for 18 months. So we're at the end of a long journey, and some really excellent work has been done, and we're excited to share it with you today.
So our agenda for the day is first to talk about why change the daily schedule and sort of where that fits in our strategic work as an institution. We'll go over the process, the guiding principles that we've used to design our schedule, and then go over the schedule. But you have it, so it's not one of those big reveals. Like, just wait for it, and then you cut into the cake. You actually have it. So we'll talk about how we got there and the elements of it, and kind of what's next. And so please know that the presentation will be available and shared with parents. Also know that if you were supposed to be somewhere else, you're on live stream, or the back of your head is. So we're also being live streamed as well. So thank you to those who are watching us. We wanted to make sure that we were able to be available to everyone and share the information in a timely fashion. So that's our plan. And if you would please hold your questions until the end. We have plenty of time for questions, and if your question's answered, I talked to Emily Post, and she said you can leave after your question's answered. You won't hurt anyone's feelings, because I know you have a lot of other things to do. That wouldn't be disrespectful to it. We just want to be available. And if you have a particular, more specific question that you would rather just ask, we stay after, and you can ask us that question as well. So we want to make sure you have your questions answered, and we'll go through the presentation.
Okay.
Good. Yeah.
Thank you. If you were here in 2013, either in the middle school or the upper school, 2013, 2014, and you went through the last cycle of changing our schedule, would you raise your hand, see if we have any folks here? Yep. Okay, so just a few. So you know that we have been through this before, and so what you have in your hands might look familiar to you because we've made some changes, but it's not quite as drastic as the last time we changed our schedule. But you may be wondering why, and the why is really important. So our strategic plan is a living document, and it asks us on a regular basis to examine our practice, examine the structures that we've built, examine, in this case, the student learning environment. So you can go to our website and dive into the strategic plan at any level of detail that you like. But this is the part that is driving this presentation today. So student learning experience, specifically the learning environment. And we're looking at the goals and objectives over here, that the daily schedule optimizes instructional time, supports diverse course offerings, recognizes the importance of extracurricular activities and free time, ensures optimal student health and academic performance, and creates opportunity for collaboration. And daily schedules have a shelf life. So while it's been since 2013, since we've looked at this the last time, this won't be the last time that we look at a daily schedule. That doesn't mean we're changing it again next year. But it is part of a healthy organizational life to look at things like this in a periodic way. When we look at things, then, we can come up with a few different conclusions. The first would be everything is functioning exactly how we want it, and we don't need to make any changes. There could also be, wow, everything is really out of whack and we need to scrap it all and start over. And then there's the part in the middle where it's kind of like, we're almost there, but we would like to make some changes to make it even better. So that is a pretty routine process for us in everything that we do around here, whether it's the daily schedule or curriculum, scope and sequence, all those kinds of things. So I talked about driven by the school strategic plan, and then some of the bigger gets that we want to accomplish through this is really recognizing the opportunity to get better sleep for teens. So looking at the sleep cycle for students has been a big driver to have us look at, is our current schedule accomplishing that? And then, of course, a big part of our initiatives here at Parker have been student and faculty wellness. So that's kind of the backdrop and the why did we even take up the project of looking at our daily schedule. The other piece that we'll talk about along the way is how this is a values-driven process. And I like to say many people have talked about like your finances. If you look at your checkbook, it tells you what you value because that's where you spend your money. If you look at a daily schedule and school life and look at our money, so to speak, our currency is the minutes that we have to spend. And so where we put our minutes reflects the values. And Dr. Gillespie has actually brought quite an extensive background and process in leading this, and she'll be talking about that with you.
And also
next.
that our students don't know what checkbooks are.
Yes, that too.
That would fall very flat if you were a student audience. And so we had, as Mr. Lang said, spent time in this larger process, right? So how we spend time as a reflection of our values is part of the life of a school. Specifically to doing a study of what would be our current schedule and where we're going. We formed our committee. We worked on our process, and I'll go over that process with you. And then the goal and the function of the committee was to then present a recommendation. First, Mr. Lang and I were both sort of chairing that committee, up to the Parker leadership team. The Parker leadership team is Mr. Yaley, the 3 division heads, the CFO, Director of Development, and Director of Enrollment Management. And we work closely with Director of Communications, Lori Foote. And so it's a process it's institutional impact, even though in the schedule we're talking about will be specific to the middle and upper school allocations of time. So we had a really great committee. We worked very hard. The committee is still we're circling back with the committee now. We had some I kept using the term robust discussions. Like we had some arguments for sure, right, in this process. And that's really important because we're all fierce advocates for kids and believe in what can we do that's best for kids. And there are always different paths to get there. And so the committee was just extraordinary. And I believe our product, our work, everything that we did was the result of just working with outstanding educators. The process piece, I think it's the next slide. So it wasn't just one group going through all this. It's actually included touch points. Back in November, I believe there was a broader survey. We had lots of parent feedback, lots of student feedback. All of that has fed into the process. So as Mr. Lang said, it's a values-based process. So what that meant was until March, we were focused on what are our values, like what matters the most. In the universe of all the things that are good, you have to make choices as a school, and you have to establish like what are the most important things. So we took a very long time in a process that involved doing a workshopping with the faculty on what are those guiding principles. What will we use to determine then how we use time, not having time drive it. And that sometimes can be a mistake institutions make, and you realize that what you end up with is actually your values. But if you haven't been intentional, that's happening to you as an institution. In our case, we're very intentional. We can explain how every piece of the schedule reflects those guiding principles. And so we did a lot of work on that part of the process to make sure we're on firm ground. Then we went into the next step, which is how do you take a value and translate it into a component on a schedule? And we'll give you some examples of that. So it was very sort of process-driven, but also values-driven. And that's, I believe, the second part of the work happened in a way that made so much more sense because we had spent so much time. It was clear to us, this is a value, they're coming in conflict, let's have a discussion about that. So it worked really well, and you're looking at a translation of values in your hands. Like those are the values translated into a schedule.
Okay. So those values are turned into our guiding principles. So our guiding principles reflect Parker's mission and vision, compliance for accreditation and allocation of time. I'm happy to share with you that Parker, in terms of days in the school year and in minutes of instruction, well exceeds the minimums that are required by our accrediting bodies. Optimize the student sleep cycle, honor student and faculty wellness through a healthy pace of the day, community building and character development, professional collaboration and learning, supporting whole child education, equity, access, and inclusion, and that the curriculum should drive the schedule. And as Dr. Gillespie described then, those needed to be translated into actual schedule components. So something like pace of the day, you'll see on the middle school side, we had the opportunity to create a 15-minute break after the first 3 periods of the day. That is how a component works. We can do woo-woos,
like audience participation.
So here are the translated guiding principles.
So some of these, like you said, like you have guiding principles based, and you're like, well, what does that look like in action? Well, first of all, if we're truly going to honor the optimal sleep cycle, and I want to say that the whole schedule reflects the guiding principles. This one component, we know that not all of our students will benefit from. We know that not all of our students will have the, in terms of their family and the needs of their family, be able to arrive at school later. So I just want to acknowledge that, because it is something that is real for families as well. So I do want to say that. It's so the translated value is school starts at 8:30 and nothing happens before school. We'll talk about if kids arrive early, but in terms of anything, we won't have activities, we're not having practices, we're not having, anything there, and I will talk about some time, but we protect that. So that's a translated value. The start time is a translation of that guiding principle. So in the upper school, moving from 8 to 7 blocks, not just moving from 8 to 7 blocks in itself, but that allowed us to serve the value of several things. One, pace, community time, and equity and access. So different components have that, and we'll talk more about it. Longer lunch in the upper school, like everyone wanted longer lunch in the upper school, so this is a big shout out to that. We were able to make that happen, and that's a pace of the day, absolute easy translation of pace of the day. We'll talk about why we have co-curricular in the afternoon, what the office hours and open time is in the afternoon, but those are all translated values. Let's see. So the create some time for performing arts, you won't see on the schedules before you. That's when we look at when we schedule in the upper school those classes, to the best of our ability, like dance class, for example, where the students change for class, they lose instructional time. We will do our best to schedule those close to other times where it can spill over and they can get changed and get to lunch, for example. So you won't see that in the schedule, but as we schedule in the implementation. The dedicated community time, if we say we value community and we say we value character education and we say we value that time that is not a pure academic time, then we need to dedicate time to that. Because you can talk all day about it, but then if everyone's days are packed and you haven't said this has a value, it doesn't have a value. You're just talking about it. So that's a translated component. One of our other guiding principles is about teachers, teacher support, and teachers' professional growth. So we knew that we needed to have that time for teachers, that it also happens in the day where that time falls. And so in the upper school, that co-curricular time, which we'll talk about, is also a time for faculty teams to meet, to do planning, and those kinds of things. So those are examples of translating. And we'll go more into the details of it, because when we talk about the schedule, we actually talk about it. But in terms of helping you understand, how do you take a guiding principle and turn it into a scheduling component?
Okay. So we mentioned earlier that we had robust discussion, or even sometimes flat out arguments, which got us to a very healthy place. We gathered in a room much like this one, and we put up the guiding principles around for all of the faculty to comment on, and then we also had a blank page that said, what did we miss? And that final one on the right-hand side, curriculum drives the schedule, we were so close to it that we were like, well, of course, but faculty actually really wanted us to call it out, and they were right. Because what it ended up allowing us to do is the middle school must have 8 blocks in the day, and the upper school really wanted 7 blocks in a day. So we were like 8 blocks, 7 blocks, 8 blocks, 7 blocks, back and forth, and both of us sticking to the values that we needed produced the outcome that upper school now has a longer lunch and middle school has a 15-minute block, 15-minute break. So it was really important for us to approach it in the way that we did and then stick to what we needed.
Right, and one of the guiding principles that we didn't call out, and we realized like it's one of those understood, is that our program, 6 through 12, is as strong as it is because we work 6 through 12. So in addition to our arts and our music and our visual arts, performing arts, and athletics, we have more than 12 teachers who teach in both divisions. It allows us to offer programming, specifically in French and Mandarin, for example, where we're able to continue a language all the way through that may have more single sections in the upper school. In social studies, in all of our areas, we have crossover teachers. That combination is what makes us, like, we're leveraging huge resources, and we're able to offer, in the upper school, I think we have not courses, but individual sections, like where kids are with a teacher is 537, I think. Like, so, you know, we have a lot of time that teachers are spending in different courses in our curriculum in the upper school because our schedules are paired. So one of the questions that we started with was, is it better for us to be 612 and keep those components, or would it be better to go ahead and just upper school, you do your upper school thing, and middle school, you do your middle school thing? And we came to the conclusion, again, we affirmed our current structure because it is better for students. We're able to provide an incredible program, as well as professionally, our departments meet together and they can see how the pieces fit together, you know, a 7th grade mathematics moving all the way up through. And so that's our schedules that we're going to share with you that you have in front of you are linked intentionally because it adds incredible value to our students' experience.
Agreed. So one of the great pieces, so this is this will be the 10th time, I think,
I know,
that
yeah.
we've taken our show on the road. So,
Woo!
and we didn't even sell tickets. But
I don't have prizes. I do love Oprah, but no, not schedules for you and schedules for you. That's what we have. Schedules for everybody.
A schedule. And in one of those presentations, we got some great feedback that said, you know, most people don't actually look at school schedules every day and may not know exactly how to read them. So we're going to take just a little time to walk through how to read our schedule and how our schedule functions, and along the way, we'll kind of fill in the things that we were able to achieve. So if you look at our schedule, it's what we call a rotating drop schedule. And so each letter on that schedule for the middle school represents a place where a student can have a course. So if we start on Monday at 8:30, you see A block. And depending upon how the student's schedule is scheduled, that could be math, English, science, world language, whichever course happens to go in there. And what we've learned over time about students is, let's just say that that's my 8th grade English 8 class, and you're not an English student. You're like, oh, listening to Mr. Lang in class Monday morning, 8:30. Oh, I just want to go back to sleep. If that's you, the chances of you being the most successful that you can be in that class are lessened if that's just the same across the entire week. So what we know about how children's brains work is that if we expose them to the content and the faculty member at different times during the day, they have a better opportunity of being successful in that class. And so that's why our schedule rotates like that. We also have 8 blocks in our day, but not every block meets every day. So you'll notice A through E, and that's the end of the academic day on Monday. But students do have courses in the carrier block F. So that's the first class on Tuesday. And then it goes through in that predictable pattern of A, C, D. And you'll notice there's no E on Tuesday. So that's the drop part. It's a rotating drop schedule. So the rotation is the letters rotate in a predictable way throughout the week, and we drop one class. So students will meet their teachers 4 times in 1 week for a 50-minute block for a total number of instructional minutes of 200 minutes in every class that they take. So some of the other things that you can see from this schedule here is what would be B is actually 6th grade, 7th grade, and 8th grade. There's a rotation of PE, art, and music. And you also see music, athletics, and art down here, and art, music, and athletics here. So we've been able to band those together. That's pretty similar if you have a middle schooler right now. What you may not know if you haven't ever seen it is that means all 115 sixth graders go to PE at the same time.
You're like,
It's a
awesome.
sight
Can
to
I be
see.
there too? You're welcome to come.
They divide up into their individual sub-sports once they get there, but the same is true for art, and the same is true for music. So while all sixth graders go to music at the same time, they may be taking band, or they may be taking guitar, or chorus, or strings. So they subdivide in that band during that particular period of time. That's where we also capture faculty prep time, meeting time, and time for teaching teams to meet together in the schedule. By moving the start of the day and taking advantage of what you'll see is the upper school now has a longer lunch in this space. We were able to create this 15-minute break here in the day. So 11:10 to 11:25, we'll have a 15-minute break. That came about kind of in an ad hoc way. Our sixth grade team was letting students have about 10 minutes to kind of run around before advisory on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And we saw in real life, like, wow, if we let 11-year-olds run around for a little bit, they come back much better prepared to learn. Let's put that in the schedule. And it's I think, going to be very important for us as we move forward. We've had a break in the past, but the schedule that we currently have does not have a break. So this will be a good fix for us there. The other thing that we aimed at was pushing 7th and 8th grade athletics to the last block of the day, almost every day that we can. And that lets us accomplish several things. For our 8th graders that are going to be going off campus to go and compete against other schools, now that's where their athletics period naturally is. So they'll get the most benefit from that. 7th graders will get a little bit, but if they have to leave early, they will miss their music period. The other thing that it does for us for athletics is you may know that it's very difficult to find high-quality off-campus coaches. Most of our coaches, I'd say a majority of our coaches across 6 through 12, come to us from off-campus. And if we can offer them a better job, if we can offer them a job that starts at a predictable time, we're going to get a higher quality of off-campus coach. And we also tell them, come and have lunch. Enjoy this wonderful meal. It's like our little teaser, you know. Actually, when we're bringing faculty on for interview, they go, wow, you eat like this every day? And I'm like, yeah, can't you tell?
Right. I know.
And then they go, I don't know what I'm supposed to say to that.
Like, we have a wellness program.
They have a little time to prepare, and then they go right into here. And what we capture here is that most of the time, if we have a high-quality coach, they will not only do our 7th and 8th grade, but then they will continue on and join our varsity program. And so now what we get is we get high-quality athletic coaches who will start working with our students in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade and then continue on with them. And it creates that staircase effect that we're looking for everywhere across the school. So our students are working with professionals all the way through and the same set of professionals. It also really helps us attract coaches that we can work with over time, who then we get them beyond just like, yes, you're professional, and yes, you're excellent at coaching your sport. And now we have the opportunity to teach you what our Parker value system is, so that even while they're out on the soccer pitch or the softball mound or whatever they're doing, they're getting that Parker experience as well. So a few more highlights with little yellow stickers over here. Faculty are professionally available from 8 to 8:30. As you heard Dr. Gillespie mention, that is going to be time where we are not going to schedule anything for students. But the faculty workday is 8 to 4. And we know that not all of our students will be able to make office hours. So they're professionally available. That means if I want to meet with them, or if they need to have a department meeting, or if they need to meet with their teaching team, they're here on campus. And for students for whom that office hours might have been a miss, they can make an appointment in that time. But we're not going to plan anything in that space for students because we want to honor that 8:30 start. Advisory still is in the same place for the same amount of minutes. Our social emotional learning, character education, study skills all occur during our advisory time. We also get a little bit of homework time in there from time to time in the middle school as well. Again, coordinating with the upper school created this 15-minute break. And then to honor the whole child, art, music, and PE have equivalent instructional minutes in all of our courses. So music, art, and PE also have 200 minutes of instruction every week, just like math, English, science, world language. And then faculty professional development, I want to acknowledge that having an early release or a late start in one way or the other affects your family. And I also want to acknowledge that when we have a full professional development day, that also affects your family. We're trying to make it very predictable, let you know that those dates that are calendared well in advance, and I promise you that they are directly benefiting your children. The time that we spend together as a faculty working on our craft, making sure that we're keeping our professional edge is directly benefiting your children. So that time now, though, is moved into the afternoon, which gives us a steady start time in the morning, and that will have some transportation benefits. We also have our transportation consultant here to talk to you at the end of our presentation. And then office hours, 3:30 to 4 every day. Faculty are available for tutoring and student support. From time to time, faculty are here longer than that. And the only day that that's not applicable is going to be Wednesday when we have professional development time. And now for the upper school.
Now for the upper school. All right, so all of our faculty are 8 to 4. And you can see the faculty professional development, we moved to the afternoon, so our start time is the same, grades 6 through 12. We will be working, everyone's going to be coming at the same time, so we'll be carpooling, moving our arms more rapidly, but having you not drive faster in the carpool lane. But we'll all be starting at the same time. In the upper school, and we follow the same format, right? So what's really important, and you have it on two sides, we actually have a side-by-side schedule, but it's like, for those of us who are used to staring at schedules, it makes sense, but the feedback we received was like too much. But our schedules are connected. So there are things that each area. So one part of that is that our G block ties to the middle school arts athletics block. So our G block in the upper school to make the whole schedule work. And by the way, in a course of a year, about 75% of upper school students participate in athletics. It's a huge part of our program, and on a whole variety of levels. So we benefit immensely from having our middle school students so well prepared with the coaching that they'll get and all of that to come to upper school. So it's everyone, it's an everyone wins situation. It does mean that while we have other classes that rotate, that our G block will always be at this time. And there's not a way to change that without having another impact. And we felt through our whole process, the overriding value as we put it all together was still achieved. And so I just want to note that. We also have sort of, in terms of the academic day, all of our courses, any course a student would take ends at 2:35. So for students who are participating in athletics, for example, and have away matches, many of them will not have to miss as much, but some will be missing, like depending on what time they leave. One of the other things we know is that we're not the only school to go to this, nor are we the first. And the whole county is, and so I can't promise that all the stars will line up, but because the county is, there's more conversation about start times for after-school athletics, and I would predict that there'll be a little bit more flexibility, but I absolutely cannot promise that. So if your child is doing a sport, and depending on what season and what day the games are, it'll be fewer courses missed unless the departure from school is during G block. So I just want to acknowledge, like that one will get hit the most, and it could be any one of your child's courses because we will schedule in. So that's why we can't break it apart. So you say, like, why don't you just move it? But we can't move it. So we'll do questions at the end. So this has a lot of these. First of all, we're switching from 8 to 7 classes. Why? We're going back to 7. We used to have 7. Right now in the upper school, we have some community time and we force everything into it, and then the kids need flex time where they can have their clubs. So we're constantly negotiating the 2 days a week that we have some time to do this. We need to have time to build community. We need time for advisory. We just had raise your hand if your child said anything about e-cigarettes in the assembly yesterday. Please, okay, upper school parents, raise your hands. I know your kids weren't skipping because we take roll. So ask them at home say, I'm curious about what Ms. Davigny shared with you about your brain development. I'm curious what Nurse Maggie said about e-cigarettes, and just be like, huh. Do it in the car, driving, they're trapped, you're driving, you're good. But we need that time for that program, and what we're finding is we're all grabbing for the same time, and it all had a value, but we hadn't assigned time to it appropriately. So they were in conflict. We ask our kids to be thoughtful about creating clubs, having leadership opportunities, and be able to advocate for things they're passionate about. It's all critical to adolescent development for them to be in those spaces. And yet we had no time for it. It was like this or this or this, and by the time you added up the ors, it was like 5, and nothing was really feeling. So we said, that's a value we have, and we haven't allocated time to it. So we need to do that. And in order to do that, we needed to pull out that 8th block for a course and insert that time. So we get it, it's there. It's also at this time here, right? So we will offer the same courses. We have all the classrooms and teachers for them. What is the challenge when you go from 8 to 7? Will our course offerings change? No. Will our graduation requirements change? No. Will the number, like where students are, where the conflicts will emerge the most for kids is where they currently exist. So for example, for students who take upper level French and upper level Mandarin, those are singletons. There's only one of the courses. So anytime, and it's a graduation requirement to have 3 consecutive years. Anytime something's a singleton, the student has to take that, so other courses offered at that time, they'll need to choose the requirement one. So that's where some conflicts. There are other conflicts, like kids have, they want to take, whatever it is, and they run in conflict. So there are always conflicts, but I just wanted to highlight that. It's the same number of courses in the day, and we're not changing or prescribing that students only take 6 courses. It's actually a recommendation that we've always had. And I was curious about sort of where our kids were on this. Our 9th graders have 7 because they also have life skills. So for 9th graders, they will no longer have a required study hall. Some of this time, which is in this block here, will have specific 9th grade programming, so we don't lose that opportunity. So most of our 9th graders have 7 courses. 91 of our 10th graders have 7. They may have an art or 2 arts, or also have a PE. And then when you get to 11th and 12th grade, only like 50-something juniors out of a class of 130 and 57 seniors out of a class about 128 take 7 classes. Most of our students in the last 2 years of upper school take a 6-course load, and they have all these other things that they're doing, and they are making choices about their time. So the students who have a 6-course load will also have a free period. So in that band of time between 8:30 and 2:35, they will have, over the course of a week, they will also have a free period. If a student takes a 7-course load, they will not have a free period there, but they will have this time and the co-curricular time. So what is this time? That's when students can meet with teachers. Teachers will be available on Mondays and Fridays during that full 50-minute period. Students can work together. They can have their clubs at that time. We will have, if students are struggling or there's a need, they may be directed that they must use that time. So it's a little caveat in there. They may be required to stay. Students who do not have a commitment past 2:35 in the upper school are not required to stay at school. Our students in the upper school are involved in so many activities that now they'll be able to do at school for the most part, but not completely, because we'll talk about that with co-curricular. So students will have that, and one of the things that we have worked to address is access and equity. And so we have students where they're after school, their afternoons, they have family commitments, they have child supervision siblings, they're responsible for their siblings, or they have jobs outside of school as well. And so they haven't been able to always access our program because we just pushed everything to the edges. And that was one of our goals, to have equity and access. And this is one of the ways that value is translated. For athletics, on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, Practice can start at 3:30. Students would still have had this time. On Tuesdays and Thursdays for this co-curricular time. The co-curricular time is for academic competition teams, mock trial, speech and debate, academic league, robotics. Yeah, I saw that smile. Yeah, speech and debate. Yeah, I have to have a shout out. That doesn't mean that everything happens during that time. It's that we didn't have dedicated time for any of it to happen before. So for mock trial, for example, if they're preparing the case, they could prepare and work together, but there are 3 attorneys who have worked with us for about 8 years now. They come after work, so they will always have a commitment in the evening. Robotics, they may have time to work on things, but they have mentors who are professionals who come after work as well. So there's not an expectation it will all, the co-curricular, fit in that time. It's that we have some time for it. And others, like academic leave, all their training can happen then, but their meets are outside of that time, and the other groups as well. So during co-curricular time, what makes it different from basically this other open time is that teachers will not be available. If a teacher is an advisor, that teacher will be working with the group. Otherwise, teachers are having the same planning time that Mr. Lang talked about during that arts block when his teams work together. That's our time for that. And we go down a planning period going from 8 to 7. So that has an impact on teachers. So we need to protect that professional time for them to work and build curriculum, which has been reduced. So teachers will not be available. Kids are welcome. They can be at the library. They can work on projects. So our schedule, the value of sort of building healthy adolescents who can thrive and live lives of their own making, mean they also get to make decisions. So students have asked, please, you're scheduled all our time. Can we have some place here? So that's part of what will happen for kids. So they're all available. And then we have the office hours in addition. So students who are doing co-curricular still have office hour time. And we're wondering about sort of like, who's coming at 3:30 on a Friday? Well, you never know. So a lot of the kids have sports, and they just want to check in before they work on a project on the weekend. So our community time, so what we've done is taken that value that we've talked about, but not actually practiced, and put it into our schedule, which is probably the most significant change in the upper school, like really owning that and claiming it as important.
Okay. So what does a typical day look like for a middle and upper school student that is currently commuting in with their parent? I'm not going to talk about bus transportation right now because our consultant, Ryan Hahn, will speak to you about that in just a few minutes. But one of the things we thought might be helpful was to show you what does a day look like. So the campus opens at 7 a.m. So as we tell folks now, if you're coming before that, there is no supervision for your child. So we really discourage, please don't come before the campus is open. So the campus opens at 7 a.m. Faculty are not expected to be here until 8. So that means that any student that gets dropped off before 8 o'clock will have to be in this space. If your child is a middle schooler,
like downstairs in the
downstairs,
cafe.
Yep. If they're currently using homework club after school, it'll be in the same space. It'll be supervised. We are working with our cafeteria service to have breakfast available for purchase and things like that. And students will need to be in there until 8 o'clock. And then when faculty arrive, and we have a critical mass of adults who are over in the middle school area, then students will be released to go over there. And at least we know then there are adults around keeping an eyeball on kids, and they're going to play basketball and hang out and do whatever they're going to do. And then school will start at 8:30. And then for the rest of the day, this is our academic day. And then there's office hours time. And then the day at 4 o'clock is when teachers are not required to be in their classrooms anymore. Many of them will still stay. Or if your child makes an appointment, that can certainly happen. But for the most part, you can count on 8 to 4 for faculty. In the middle school, we have a homework club that extends till 6 p.m. And then the middle school campus closes. So the middle school campus day ends at that time, and there is no supervision past 6 o'clock. And that's exactly how it is now. The upper school is a whole different ball of wax. So I'll let Dr. Gillespie talk about that.
So in the upper school in the mornings, since we are going to continue to open school at 7, even with a late start, from 7 to 7:45, upper school, anyone who comes to campus, including upper school students, and they'll be super excited about this, but we'll work with them, needs to be downstairs also. At 7:45, the library opens just as it does now, 45 minutes before classes start. And the upper schoolers they're able to go to the library and do their thing. But for that first 45 minutes, we need to ensure student safety above all, and we need to have our students here. Like I said at the beginning of the presentation, we know that not all students will be able to come closer to the start time of 8:30. And so how we work with the students in terms of like, what can you do with that time? How do you work on the other parts of your life and make it a meaningful and productive time for the kids? They may set up a project that they do a bit of in the morning. They're kind of like, oh, that's like work I like to do in the morning. But we'll be working with the students who are here for that time, so it's productive, but they will be here. And then at 7:45, they'll be released. So the upper school is a little bit different. On this like 6 p.m. part of the day, and we also, I should note, there'll be no test tank in the morning before. Like that 8:30, that's a hard line. Like nothing happens before 8:30 a.m. The end of the day for upper schoolers depends on what they're doing. So we have activities where faculty are present, advisors are present, drama club, production weeks, and other times they're here for that. We also have robotics times, like I said, our mock trial when our attorneys are here. Our other groups, we have those adults, but we don't provide or shut down the campus because we'll have students staying for their friends' games. They're headed out on Fridays of home football games. There's always a group of kids who are around and milling about, and so that is a normal and, totally appropriate way to be, and we generally have adults around, or we sort of scooch them over. The classrooms are locked and then the library closes, but we'll scooch them over towards athletics, but not all of our kids. Like we have 90 zip codes, I think, so like we're the community here, and just like I don't drive home to Encinitas and come back for football games, like I'm here too. So I feel like that's a really important thing that's totally appropriate. So we don't have a close end time on our campus, but we also kind of recognize and encourage when kids are able to come support their friends in different activities as well.
And one of the things that we already do in middle school is when students are here in this space, and I'll just be walking around like, hey, what are you doing? You doing your homework? Oh, I don't have that much. I'm like, that's great. Go sit down, knock it out, go and be free. Be free. So this is my pitch to them. And I think it'll be the same thing if your family happens to be in a position where your students are going to be here in the morning. If they're here in the morning, I'm not going to be encouraging them to wait till the morning to do the homework that they have to turn in that day. But
like I'm doing my A-block homework.
Exactly.
Like, maybe not the best plan.
But for middle school, we're still cultivating study skills. We're asking them to learn how to chunk their studying. Please do not wait until the night before the vocabulary test to try and learn 23 words and expect them to actually be learning. You may be able to spit them back the next day, but that's not learning. So having students use that morning time to interleave their learning, to chunk their learning, to say, wow, I have a project due in 2 weeks. Maybe I can work on a piece of that. Or I know I have a test next Tuesday. Maybe I can do 15 minutes of studying right now to stay on top of that stuff. So it's really helping to train them so that they're using the time that's available to them well. And then, of course, when they get into the upper school world and they have so much more freedom and agency over their time, then really having the skill set already internalized to be able to use that time well.
In the upper school, we're not just preparing kids to go to college, right? That's not Parker's mission at all. It's way, way beyond that. But the more students have agency and choice over time and understand sort of the consequences, both terrific and like, oh, yikes, I should have started sooner, the better they will be, the more well-equipped they will be for that next transition to college, where they really do have, many of our students have big chunks of time that they have to manage. So it's a sort of a good step from middle school with more time, but kind of in that space, to then the sort of collegiate time when they'll, they come back and like, oh my gosh, like I have class. And by the way, do colleges have classes on Fridays anymore? Because I have 4 kids, one's just finishing college. She's like, yeah, we don't have classes on Fridays. So they just stopped fighting the fight. Like, don't have French at 8 a.m. on Fridays. So, but our kids need that training, and we can't expect them to be able to do something they haven't practiced. And they can't hypothetically feel what it means to have not made the choice about allocating time. They actually have to live that, and parents, you have to let them live it. As hard as that can be sometimes, you just want to swoop in. They have to learn it for themselves, and that's part of our job.
So that is what a typical day might be for a family that is not using our transportation service. So now I'm going to invite Ryan Hahn up to talk to us a little bit about what's happening if your child takes the bus.
Well, hello, everybody. How are you? That was pretty quiet.
They're like, oh.
It's like I get to swoop in at the end, and I want to see a little more smiles. So I'm Ryan Hahn. I'm a senior consultant for School Bus Consultants. Raise your hand if you were one of our parent groups last week for transportation. A couple of you. Good. Good to see you all again. I recognize you. Wasn't that long ago. I appreciate all the emails and the feedback that I've been given. We are trying to align the transportation department and its mission more closely with the strategic plan at the school. And so I was hired originally to come in and do an assessment of the transportation department. I started that in May of this last year. Then they needed me to help with their transition of the outgoing director of transportation who had been here for 44 years, which is a long time. And we hired a new transportation manager, Cindy Swarches. She's not in the room right now. She's making sure the bus drivers show up for their afternoon routes. And so I've been helping through that interim director role, trying to help carry on, get the school year started. And also, it aligned perfectly with this process. Now, usually as a consultant, when I'm sent around places, I'm usually either coming in behind a process like this where I have to react and make it work. Fortunately for the Francis Parker School, they saw this coming and we are here at the same time so we can align transportation as best we can. Now, Monica had mentioned in an earlier presentation, I'm not sure if she did today, the late start for transportation students is a tough deal. We service 90 zip codes, so if you live in Poway or further away than that, it gets challenging to figure out a way when you have 2 campuses to get you here later, when you might have to leave at the same time or just a few minutes later than normal. So what we are still interested in is we know that there are many capable, smart parents and students that attend this school, and I need more feedback from you. If you have ideas of how that could work, if you have ideas and needs of your own, your individual needs, of course we can't cater a mass transportation system to every individual need, but I am interested in learning about your specific need and how we can integrate that into the overall program that I propose to administration to implement. So no, nothing has been decided in terms of transportation. However, there is a huge push for us to align the access by students who take a school bus to the Francis Parker School. No matter if they ride the bus or if they're dropped off in a car, the experience for me, the experience should be the same. So we're trying to figure out how to do that. And a couple of things that we have heard is that the middle school and the upper school advisory time is very important to parents in the afternoon. They would
Our office hour time.
Yeah, office hour time. That's important. Right now the kids have 5 minutes to get on the bus and they leave at the end of the day and they go home, except for if you live in Carmel Valley, you enjoy a shuttle bus that runs the lower campus and back, and those kids get to leave at 3:40. So they do get to benefit from that now. Direct transportation to each campus is preferred. We're hearing that from many parents. And so there's things that I may not know that you could help me factor into that kind of that concept in particular. Please keep in mind, if you have siblings, that go to 2 different campuses, they would get on 2 different buses if that would be the case. So just kind of rolling those ideas around in your mind. If you have any feedback, please let me know. Also, students utilizing transportation need and want to benefit from the late start. So we're putting routing, what we do is we do a routing analysis and a bell time study. So we put different scenarios together once the school gives us the bell times, and then we put together what option A or B could be for them. Then they choose what they want to implement, and then we help them put the system together so that it runs. There's several different ways to make this work. I'm hopeful that, just so you know, I've received about 70 emails from parents, many of them not parents that even have children on the bus, but they were super helpful to me because it helps me see the whole Parker experience. So please don't think, even if you don't ride the bus now, I want you to think if you used it, if you build a system that people like, they will come. It's like the whole baseball field and the cornfield in the middle of nowhere. I'm convinced that if you build something that is accessible, that creates access, that's convenient for the most part, people will use it. And maybe what we've had hasn't been that in totality. And the last piece that we've heard on is the convenience of stops and geographic locations that we serve. Some good feedback I received is that they'd like some more stops tied to areas that there's mass transit park and rides at. So when parents can take their children to a location where the Parker bus is, they can then get on that other mode of transportation and go to work. So accessibility is becoming a larger piece of the pie in terms of helping students get to and from school. Many people work from home and don't really want to take a 25 to 40 minute drive one way to get students down here from the North County. So I would encourage you to please contact me. My email's up there, the rhon I do have a Francis Parker email. Please think about what your experience would be like if you had transportation to your area and there was room on the bus and all of those good things. We're not wanting to necessarily stick with the status quo. We want something that works for the families here and how that could potentially benefit your experience. So I'll turn it back over to Dan or Monica.
Yep, both.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. So next steps. We're right here in October 2019 hosting a parent information session. You will be getting a parent feedback form from us. We did that about a year ago, and it'll be mostly a free response space. Any ideas that you have, comments, questions, things that you think we missed. Hey, we've got your schedule here. Did you think about this? Did you miss? You might have missed that. Very helpful to us. And then we'll launch the daily schedule resource board and on campus. Many of you already know that when you go to check on your child's progress, you go into on campus, and on that top bar there's a little icon that says resource boards. You can find all kinds of great stuff on there. The new one that our communications team will create for us will be about the daily schedule. And then from October to January, discovery, research, and planning of the transportation routes, stops, and services. And then February to March, we'll be presenting the daily schedule information at an upper school parent curriculum night and a middle school parent coffee. We'll distribute the revised transportation routes, stops, and services, distribute final daily schedule for 2020 and 2021. And also in there, but not listed, is we are also going to meet with all of our students.
So we're doing upper school on Thursday. So they've already gotten pieces of information, and that's totally normal and not a bad thing. Been this long enough, you know. But I'll be doing not this whole extensive presentation, but a presentation to them on Thursday, the 10th.
Great. And middle school will be presenting at one of our next upcoming community meetings. We'll walk through the schedule with middle school students, and we'll hear some feedback from them as well, because they're pretty smart. And they might find something we missed as well. So now it's time for questions.
So once again, if you've had your question answered, you need to leave, please feel free to leave. We won't say, oh my gosh, you didn't stay the whole time. So I just wanted to say that rather than have you stay. We appreciate your time, and I know that you have many, busy schedules, so we're grateful that you're here, and we're happy to answer your questions. And we have a mic, which you do need to use because of the live stream.
Have you thought through if this affects at all vacation schedules or the length of the academic school year, since we're shortening the academic time, if you will? I mean, you're having less classes per day, starting later, right?
Right. So students can still take 7 classes. So for a student's academic experience, it's not changing. It's because we had a required 8th period, right? So the academic program of Parker is not changing. So I just want to be clear about that. We're not reducing their academic experience at all. But this was a daily schedule component that looks at how we use the time in a day, not the broader academic calendar year.
So this has no impact on the academic calendar year at all?
Correct.
No, correct.
You're correct.
Yeah. And everyone heard that, right? That we're not reducing our academic program we're providing to students by shifting from 8 to 7. We're reducing the number of slots. That's really important to note. If we were, we would be talking about that, but that's not what we're doing.
Yes, I had a question about reducing the slots. Will certain classes that other schools may have as like after school stuff like ASB or yearbook or scribe, are they still going to be designated block classes, or are they going to meet in the gray area at
They're
240?
designated, they'll stay.
They'll remain there?
Yeah, that stays the same.
Okay.
Because then we'd lose a bunch of kids from the other opportunities.
Hi, I had a question about athletics. I understand the start time for the various days of the week, but is there a hard stop time, and will athletics programs be affected, for example, by lights or noise complaints, like from people in the area or community?
So athletics, both Mr. Thomas and Mr. Phillips, who's also on the committee, he's the chair of the PE. So we had a lot of conversations and looked at the whole program. This doesn't reflect the end time of our day for anything, but in terms of athletics and sort of any hard stops, it's how the length of time of practice, how they have practice, and what adjustments they need to make. We've done the schedule part, and any other slight iterations, we're expecting this will generally be our schedule. We're moving to the implementation stage now, which is we're looking at impacts in all the areas and working through different solutions. Those of impact areas we can predict, and then there'll be things that come up that we then have to address, always using our guiding principles. There's no hard stop at the end. In terms of the lights, for those of you new to Parker, we have X number of nights in a year, and I don't know the number, when our lights can be on past 7 or 8 o'clock, or anyway. But so that's a real thing with an agreement with the neighbors.
And then for sailing,
Yeah.
they can still, if they need to leave at 2:40, they can leave at 2:40 to get over to rig boats and get out on the water.
Right. So
Okay.
if they don't have a required commitment during this time, which is the 2:40, 3:30, students are excused. Some of our 9th grade sailors will have some required 9th grade scheduling for sure. Like, I know that's going to happen. And if they're having some academic needs, or the grade level dean says, you need to stay. But those are outliers. So the academic, that part of the day, the required to be here, ends at 2:35, because you have light, just like golf and others, where
Great.
you can't turn on gym light and sail.
Great.
Although it's probably some virtual.
Yeah, that's great. I'm thrilled about that. And then my final question is regard to lunch. My kids have been talking a little bit about the lunch lines. I noticed that the lunches are staggered next year. Is that different than it is this year? Like, will that
No,
improve
they're staggered now.
staggered now.
So what happens, and I've been like part of my first year, the first week of school, 9th graders didn't get lunch after our first assembly. And I was like, because we weren't managing the lines well. So we work with Mr. Santiago and our dining services program. So we actually are faster on the days when more kids come at the same time, like after assembly, for example. But all our kids have been able to get through the hot lunch line. We also have pasta bar, which they don't stay in the hot line for, and other options. So he's been fantastic. So this is for sure something we spend a lot of time, because even though we'll have longer, we don't want kids in lines longer. We want them to be able to get their lunch. So we want a solution that will give the balance of time back to them. So I did tell a story this morning about the day we ran out of nuggets was one of my days at the front of the line. I was like, we're out of nuggets. Like, you've got to go get pasta or something. There are no more nuggets today. And so I felt bad for the kids at the end. But that was early on, and it was just a in terms of quantity, not everyone predicting how many kids would want nuggets that day. So I just stood there and owned that, like, we'll get more nuggets. But
well,
yeah.
and a longer lunch will help also with the line and
Well, kids
ensuring-
time it, right? So now they time it, but the day they can't are days when we're in advisory or assembly because we all get out at the same time. But it's gone way faster, and Mr. Santiago's also changed what's served and how many arm movements, basically. So the dishes go faster. It's been great the last 2 weeks, and I've been there, so I can tell you. I mean, sometimes I can attest to it. And then we'll go here, and then we'll make sure it comes to this side.
Hi. It looks great. I'm thrilled to see these changes. I only wanted to ask a question about the language that if you could elaborate a little bit, because my kids are
In those languages.
some of those that
Yeah.
take Spanish, French. Yeah.
So I was using languages as an example of singleton classes where there's only one section of a level that could also be a requirement for a student. So right now it exists where we're providing that. I was highlighting it because it's good to know that if it's part of a requirement and there's only one section, you're going to make other choices. I don't know. For some kids, it never conflicts. For some students, it all lines up. But when it's that kind of class, that's only one section of it, there are other things at play. So that's my example for it. We still have the same staffing, we still have the same courses, but it's an example of a course that just fits. That could also be a requirement. Like AP Art History is a single course. That's not always required. So a student may say, well, I'd really like to take AP Art History, but I'm going to take AP European instead because I want to take this other class and they conflict. So it's all part of conversations about courses, but not any reduction in program. No. Yeah, so here and then we'll cross over. Do you mind?
Thank you. So for the upper school, if somebody is not doing a sport during a trimester, does the PE always fall in block G or?
No, PE can be any time
It could be
scheduled.
any time.
Well, PE is not likely going to be where we don't have a teacher available, but wherever we have teachers available, we only have a few during the day PE offerings. We schedule those like we schedule every other course where teachers are available. If they're a crossover, there are only certain periods that are available. So we also have 9th period PE, which is after the school day as well.
Okay. So I was just wondering because some schools have independent PE. So was
we have
that
an
considered?
independent PE. Students may also do that to a certain number of hours. So some students actually combine. They have independent hours to meet our graduation requirement. They take some independent hours. They may do a team or manage a team, and they may take a PE class. Right now, taking a PE course during the school day we have the fewest number of students who choose that option to fulfill our graduation requirement. So we're going to go, yeah. Well, Eric's like, I got this.
Oh, was it you? I thought
Did someone say pass the mic?
Thank you. Just a question. This is kind of related to the lunch. Two things. One, for the 6th grade, I noticed it's still a 35-minute period, or for the middle school.
Middle school. Yep.
And then for the upper school, it has been extended. But are you also taking into account, there's been a lot of talk about growth in the number of kids at Parker, so we already have long lines. If we're increasing the number of students, are we going to potentially have to increase the time on these periods as well in the future?
So we are not increasing the students. We are pretty much, I think, within 3 students of maximum enrollment. So there's no plan to make either the middle school is actually full.
Upper school will run to 140. We don't have 140 in every grade, but we can absolutely run our kids through the line with the time we have.
And I also do lunch duty, and middle schoolers, we did talk about that, and middle schoolers tend to eat faster. I don't know why, but they do. They typically want to just eat and go play. And so that's typically what they do. When I do lunch duty, I routinely time them. We've been able to get through the entire line in under 10 minutes.
Not in the upper school.
So
Takes
the other thing that you'll notice when you go through the cafeteria is The places where students might be saying that they're standing in the line the longest is if they want hot lunch that day, and there are also other options. So students always have access to something for lunch. There's a salad bar, a sandwich bar. There
Pasta
is
bar.
also a pasta bar,
It's
hot
like a
sandwich
wedding.
bar,
All these
and a
stations.
quick grab station as well.
Yeah.
So there may be a day. I know Stromboli Thursday. It's like a mad stampede. But for the most part, we can get all of the middle school through in about 10 minutes, and
Yeah.
then they run around like middle schoolers do.
So we've gotten on Taco Tuesdays after assembly, we've gotten all our kids through by 11:45. Well, we got at like or 10 till. Generally, we can get them through that way, but it's still, we'll have a little longer, which will help.
If I can just follow up, that's not for the kids that decide not to get hot lunch because they see the line. Because I mean, my own kids have said they see the line and they turn around, they switch to a different,
But they
like
s-
you're saying. So it is.
Yeah.
It is.
So encourage them to stay in the line, because we're actually even looking at, can we add one more path through so that everyone can? So otherwise then we wouldn't know, because we're assuming we found some solutions that are working, and more kids are going through and talking about it, but we'll keep working on it. I'm not going to pretend like it's a perfect thing, because it's we want all our kids to have those choices, and they're great offerings. Wait, no, I think they're two here.
Just going to quickly remind us how lucky we are that our school has such good lunch, that they are in
I know.
such high demand. My kid is constantly telling me about how good the food is. So that's a good problem to have. Thanks for trying to fix that. As far as the lines go. So number one, it was a quick comment about the drop off, because every now and then I'll make the mistake of dropping my middle schooler off during upper school drop off, and it's like really a lot. So just a reminder that not just we need to maybe have the 2 loops, use the side loop, like
Yeah.
that's going to be.
We'll be looking at all
yeah.
those. I was also
I'm
being
sure
a little bit
it's-
humorous about that. We'll look at that. We know that that's going to happen because we're having everyone at the same time, and so we have to look at all the sort of strategies. My experience where this has been the case, where everything started at the same time, is after about 2 weeks, people have adjusted their schedule. So if we make other changes and the rhythm of people's lives, where they're like, I'll just go a little bit, can work. But that's on the implementation time. We will need to address that.
Maybe more people will take the bus, and that would be great too.
I know. See,
There you
go.
go. We'll see. And then I just wanted to clarify, for my kid frequently will come at 7:30 and meet with the teacher before the 8 o'clock start time. That 8 to 8:30 is totally open for that kind of thing, that individual student teacher. The teachers aren't going to be told, like, no, the kids can't come and meet with you individually
So we're
at
not.
that time.
We're actually not encouraging that to maintain to 8:30 start time. So it would be, for the upper school, it would be an unusual situation where a teacher and a student have worked out a time before school. There are other times, and depending on free times, but also in our schedule. So we're actually not, it's for professionally available time, but it's not specifically to that unless there's an agreement on the part of the teacher for the upper school.
And for the middle school, it will be by appointment. And I put up the upper school. What we don't have that the upper school does have is we don't have this time right here, right? We don't have this student and faculty time, tutorials and clubs and collaboration. So we realize that from 3:30 to 4, sometimes a student might not be able to make that day. So I would encourage them to reach out and make an appointment with their teacher.
My question is regarding Test Tank. Where does that fall into the new schedule?
Right. So we are looking for Test Tank solutions. Here's where it won't fall, because I did Test Tank on Thursday. It won't be before school. And so we're looking at both for Test Tank and extended time, like what the possible solutions are for that. So we don't have a solution yet to offer, but we
Okay.
will be addressing it, and it will not be before school.
Okay, because just as a feedback, for athletes that have to leave early and then have to go into Test Tank and have to miss their practice the next day to make up
Yeah.
a test, it'd be great if it were somewhere in one of these.
Yeah,
you know.
we've got some really good ideas that we're generating right now
Great,
around
okay,
that. Yeah,
thanks.
that's a good. Thank you, because I should have mentioned it.
Hi, so first I really want to thank you for being so thorough and thoughtful in what is clearly not an easy puzzle to put together with a lot of people wanting what they want. So thank you for the time. And on the, did you just change that on me?
I did. Which one do you want?
Which one do you
And
want?
on the question, yeah, thank you.
Yep.
So I totally understand why G's had to
Yeah.
be as they are, right, to work in symphony with the middle school. But as Mr. Lang pointed out, because you are better in some classes at different times of the day, like if you're most brain dead by G and you always have math by G, is there any other solution? Like, should the kids point out that it's potentially
We can't specifically schedule kids around where they are in terms of that. It's actually one of those growth areas for everyone that's their one time that they have it all at that time. And I don't want to pretend like we could be more accommodating or have certain kinds of classes that are only scheduled there, because that's actually not going to work. And that is one of the trade-offs in terms of on balance with their time, where they get breaks and the way their pacing will go, that we feel, given that there's some impact, it's not as significant, and the gains are greater. So that's the sort of
it
the
really
straight-
wasn't
the
like a
straight
deal
answer to
breaker
it.
for me either.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
just it was
No,
the
it's
only thing
important
that I
to
really
talk about.
stuck out as.
Yeah, and it's for sure, which is why I pointed it out.
Actually, it's kind of a little bit of a mini case of that observation. If will you give consideration to kids in the varsity teams or that are playing games abroad for that G block to not be like math?
So we're not able to do that because over the course of a year, 75% of our kids play sports. And so we actually, in order to offer the full complement of our courses with as many ways we work through the conflict matrix, so like I said, we have 537-ish sections that we schedule, that we would not be able to do that. It would actually be kind of an almost impossible task because of where we are. So there won't be any courses specifically scheduled there, or sacrificial courses during that time.
That was sort of my question.
Yeah.
So I have two questions. So I have a middle schooler and a lower schooler. So the lower school schedule is not changing at all. It's still an 8:05 start time.
That
and a
is what we're hoping
3:30
for.
end.
Yes. We do. Our intention is to leave. Our current intention is to leave the lower school completely untouched by anything that we're doing right now. If there were to be any change, we would let you know, but it would be a very small change in order to, and that would come out of what we find as we look into transportation.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's the only variable that would affect the lower school. We have been in conversation with them,
Oh, yeah.
and so I would say the most you could expect would be a 15-minute swing. But it is like top of the list to not disturb the lower school schedule and starting time.
Right. And then if it was made due to transportation, that would make complete logical sense for everybody who's not in Mission Hills. For the upper school, you guys had 8 blocks, but was one like a mandatory spare?
Mandatory free period.
I got it.
Yeah.
And you said that almost 100% of the 9th graders take 7 classes now, but that most of them are taking PE elsewhere?
Yeah, so very few of our students take their PE during the day. They get it from participating in athletics. So our 9th graders will have, it's life skills is the course that slots in. And we have many students, and we've added an additional art section because we were waitlisted and we didn't have as many slots for the 9th graders who were also, thanks to the great work of the lower and middle school, there's this amazing interest in the arts, and we're needing to meet that need. So they will have 7, and they add in if they want to take an elective.
So they'll add in 7, which includes the elective.
Yeah, so they won't have more than 7. They don't. Yeah,
They-
they don't
and
have
they-
study hall. They had mandatory study hall.
I got it.
And that is what goes away, which is why I was saying that, whichever one's up there, during that time, we will have some 9th grade programming on Mondays and Fridays to do some study skills and other things that we were doing as part of the study hall program.
During the 240 to 3:30 slot.
Yep, during the 2.
And so, okay, so like for my son, he takes karate out of the school, which he'll be substituting in for PE. So then he'll take 7 academic or arts or music subjects during the day. That'll be his like kind of quasi study hall, the 240 to 3:30, and then he'll have his PE outside school, and that's how most of the kids do it.
Well, to a certain point, then you can't get all your credits in independent.
No,
Yeah.
yeah.
So
Okay.
his day, as you're describing it, if he's required, like depending on how long the requirement is for ninth grade, then he would be available but not have the other office hours. If you were to have him leave at 3:30, he would have access to the office hours if it's after 4.
It is after
Yeah.
4, but other students would be taking their PE at 2:40 to 3:30.
Well, they typically take their art as their elective, not a PE
okay.
elective. I think I wasn't
And it's going to be
articulating
in
that
these
very-
lettered. It's going to be
Yeah,
in the lettered
that's-
carrier blocks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let me back up
Okay.
and answer your
Thank
question
you.
more effectively. Our students in ninth grade, all their courses are in corresponding letters. So they have a course they were required to take called life skills, and I don't even know, I can't remember, it's different blocks. That's actually one of those class periods.
Got it.
Their whole schedule is in the letters.
I got it.
They just
Okay.
don't have a required free anymore because that would have been their 8th.
Got it. Okay.
And that 8th one we capture twice a week. And then we'll be rolling this, like we have to build what that's going to look like. But I just want to manage expectations of parents of ninth graders that won't always be, you can always leave school at 2:35. Like I want to be sure that we've managed expectations and requirements.
All right. So, with the risk of sounding completely dense, the PE is in one of the lettered.
PE is a course,
it.
so you could have PE during B
Correct.
block. You know,
Got
we have
it.
yoga, we have other classes. They would schedule as part of their lettered schedule. Yeah.
Got it.
So
Okay.
I'm glad you asked because I bet other people had a similar question. They just haven't asked.
But I think maybe one of the things, because you said you have a middle schooler, right?
Right.
And so right now, the difference between middle and upper school is that in middle school, PE is part of our program. That's why we
Yes.
need 8 blocks.
Yeah.
In the
Oh,
upper school, most students in the upper school fulfill their physical education graduation requirement by playing a sport after school.
Got it. I got
Yeah.
it.
And so in
No, that's
your
helpful.
child's case, if they're going to try and do, your child's going to do karate as their independent PE, they can get part of the way there, but not all of the way there.
Yeah.
Got it.
Okay?
All right, it'll go there next.
Thank you very much for all the effort, and I'm very pleased with the schedule, and it clearly reflects a lot of thought. But I had kind of just a quick question, wondering when everybody was thinking about where to go with the schedule, there were a lot of choices out there, a lot of information, and some proponents of the modified block would advocate that, and just those that you don't know the modified block, that includes offering all the courses, 7 courses typically, but longer hours or fewer courses per day in longer periods of time. So advocates suggest that it increases engagement, potentially decreases homework. So when everybody was hashing out the schedule, I was wondering what kind of dialogue was given to that.
Oh, great question. So we did explore all the different lengths of instructional time and actually had a research component. So everything that we're building is also research-based. So the research is clear that there isn't one optimal instructional block. We did talk about what would be the value. And in order to get there, if we had gone in that direction, because it has a value, and so do 50-minute blocks, right? Because there isn't one, or we would all be doing it. We realized that in order to optimize that instructional time, have the highest, most effective use of it, would require the training and time with teachers to get them ready to implement, and that we would not have been ready to do that, and it wouldn't have had the benefit that you're seeking. In terms of the homework workload part, that also doesn't always work, depending on how people choose to use it. Decoupling the two, so we are having conversations about what's the appropriate, purposeful, meaningful homework, what's appropriate for workloads. We're having that conversation now. So it's not, we haven't tied it to the schedule. Whatever the schedule is, we want to figure out, are we doing the best by student learning and student well-being in that arena as well? So we did have really good discussions about that and did the sort of deep dive on it. And there's if you have all day, I have all day. There are so many interesting ways to go with the schedule. And we feel really good that we didn't just make change for change's sake, because there are a lot of interesting things that we're curious about and like that would be fun to try. We kept going back to the discipline of what are our guiding principles. If we're achieving them this way, why would we make a change? And where we did make a change, it's to achieve it. So we're very judicious in that work as well. There's a hand. Wait, did it go back over? Is everyone? Oh.
This is actually pretty much only affects juniors and senior driving, kids who are driving.
Kids who are driving.
So if they're done after G block and they have sports, is it going to be similar to now where they don't need to stick around? They can leave and go home and come back, or go get something to eat and come back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so
it's not going to be a requirement. They have to be supervised on campus for that.
No, we're just going to look at student whereabouts around that and make sure we can know where kids are and keep them safe. And then that, it's also, a lot of this too is like, one thing is that for most students, like, depending on if they have siblings, it's going to be choosing to use this time because now it's available. And then many of them have sibs, and so it's like, oh, I can leave, but you can't. And they're like, oh, dear scheduling team, can you please put my G block with this block? And so they can get out of, line it up so they don't have to wait. So that's how it will work, and they'll have that chance. And what we'll want to encourage, and it may be that's a good use of their time, is actually like, how can you really use this time now? Because then if that's happening in a way that makes sense, sometimes it's actually just to go play spike ball, but just have a change in gear. When they're coming home, they've had more of their day managed. And I do believe that the pace of the day, especially for students, depending on their choice of time, if they really choose to use this time, they can also have a fuller experience. Like if they have a chance to really be a part of, really do clubs, they have a chance to do other enriching things that have just been pushed to the side. And those are what kind of often feed their sense of self, their confidence, and their well-being. And it's not that they're doing more. It's like, this is not to have them be able to do more. It's about choices. More, more is better. Almost ever. I can't think of a scenario. Or I guess more food for everyone who's hungry, right? So that would be, yes, that would be a good thing. But in terms of, so no one's hungry. But I think that it's about like those choices, but we weren't giving them the option to make the choices within the parameters. We were expecting them to find the other times. And that's what's kind of gone out to that space. So we're very excited. We know like there's no perfect schedule. There are always trade-offs, but this schedule is based on a whole set of principles that we worked very hard to develop and very thoughtfully and intentionally worked to translate into what you see. So I'll be sharing with the kids Thursday for upper school parents. So they're all getting bits and pieces, like enough to be dangerous. I heard that. I'm like, believe it all, believe it all.
Can I ask one question?
Sure.
And actually, I'm not even sure how it relates to what you're doing. It's just input for Dan Lang on middle school.
Mm-hmm.
So one thing, having 3 kids have gone through middle school, I've really loved the advisory period, particularly for 6th graders.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like it's getting cut smaller and smaller every year with every child that I have going through it. There's just less advisory time.
It's
It
the
used
same
to be
amount.
every day.
It's the same amount of time.
Is it every day still? It used to be every day.
But it's
So-
a whole class period.
Yeah, we
So
used
you
to
still
we
do
used
it?
to have it every day. So you're probably thinking back
Many
to your
years. Yes.
very first child that came through.
Yes.
We had advisory in the afternoon, but it was 20 minutes, and so it was a shorter period of time every day.
Mm-hmm.
And now we have 2 instead of having. So the number of minutes is equivalent, but rather than having it 20 minutes for 5 days, we have it 2 days for 50 minutes, which lets us go deeper and actually do a full lesson in that time. So it was a
Okay.
pedagogical decision around that.
And you're still teaching the organization of.
Yep.
Okay.
Didn't you
Yep.
just do planners?
We do
Well,
planners all the
No, you
time.
did. Yeah, I saw the notes on the whiteboard. I was like, they must have done planners.
The difference between a due date, D-O, and due date, D-U-E. Yes. And that was 8th grade.
Yeah. Thank
Yeah.
you. Oh,
But
wait,
thank
one
you.
more?
I'm glad that you value it because we put so much into it. Yeah.
Quick last question, just to clarify, I think you already went over this.
Okay.
For high school, they're going to 7 blocks, but
Yes.
they can fill all 7 of those blocks.
Yes, they may.
Excellent.
We're not going to recommend it. Well, for 9th grade, it's a little different because life skills
Right, they're
is-
already filled.
Right. So when they fill all 7, what they're negotiating is not having a free block during this time of their day.
Yeah, no, I'm primarily thinking of kids who, like, I have a sophomore who's planned his schedule on an 8
Oh, yeah,
block
yeah,
schedule
yeah. Uh-huh.
and hasn't done art yet. So
Yeah.
junior and senior year,
There's
he's
also
gonna need
summer
those 7 blocks.
opportunity if you're interested. We do offer we have kids who will take their arts credit in the summer. I'm not saying that everyone should
Yeah.
go to summer school, but
They already did summer school.
Yeah.
Chemistry was enough.
so they'll be able to slide their planner in, but it's also time to have good conversations as well. So
Sure.
yeah.
Okay, just wanted to clarify.
Yeah, thank you.
So I also just had a 9th grader come through, and she had to choose between music and life skills. I think it was an art and life skills, and I feel like it's, for my past kids that have gone through, they've dropped their music as a result of life skills, and they've never picked it up again.
So
I just want to bring it up as a consideration
So
for future scheduling.
We have students. There's only one slot for art.
Yeah.
So that's what's different, but there's a slot for art. The issue we had was we didn't have enough seats for all of the arts electives. But
No,
art,
what happens is they're in middle school taking both music and art, right? And they might have an interest in
Yeah.
both. And then when they get to 9th grade, there's only, because of life
Yep.
skills, there's only one period, so they have to pick music or art. And especially the kids who drop music, they a lot of times won't
They
pick
don't
it
pick it
back
up
up
again.
because
Yeah.
they feel like they've fallen behind or
yeah. So
that-
we're not able to have a schedule that allows for those for those two, and the value of life skills is one programmatic. So there's a choice that we've made as an institution that clearly you may not agree with.
Well, no, just something to think about maybe in the future.
Yeah, yeah,
It's a shame.
yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Thank you, everybody.
Oh,
Have a nice
thank
afternoon.
you. This is it. This morning we were like, we'll be back at 12:30 if you want to come back.